9 months ago, OpenAI signed the biggest GPU commitment in history, 10 gigawatts of NVIDIA's Vera Rubin systems. Then, in June, it walked on stage and unveiled its own chip, a processor it designed itself with Broadcom. The headlines wrote themselves: OpenAI is breaking up with NVIDIA. But that is not what's happening. Both moves are part of the same strategy, and understanding it explains where the money in AI silicon actually flows. This is Jalapeño, what OpenAI built, why it built it now, and who really gets paid. Start with the object itself. Jalapeño is what OpenAI calls an intelligence processor, its first custom chip, co-designed with Broadcom and built on TSMC's 3-nanometer process. The package is enormous, one compute die pushed close to the reticle limit, the largest size a lithography machine can print in a single shot, surrounded by 6 stacks of high-bandwidth memory, with a separate chiplet handling input and output. Broadcom's Tomahawk networking silicon ties the racks together. 2 things stand out. First, it is inference only. Jalapeño doesn't train models, it runs them, serving answers to hundreds of millions of users. Second, the speed. From first design work to tape-out, the moment a design is frozen and sent to the fab, took 9 months. The industry norm for a chip this size is 2 to 3 years. Broadcom calls it the fastest ASIC development cycle ever attempted at this scale, possible because Broadcom supplies pre-hardened building blocks, the memory interfaces, and high-speed links, while OpenAI focuses on the math of its own models. So why would the world's most GPU-rich AI company design its own silicon? One phrase: unit economics. Training a frontier model is a one-time capital expense, enormous but paid once. Inference is different. Every ChatGPT answer, every API call, every token costs money, forever. At OpenAI's scale, inference is the electricity bill, the rent, and the payroll combined, and it grows with every new user. NVIDIA's GPUs are magnificent generalists. They train anything, run anything. But generality has a price. Silicon spent on flexibility you never use, and margin paid to a vendor with pricing power. A chip built around one workload, transformer inference, strips all of that out. Broadcom's CEO claims roughly half the cost per unit of inference compared with today's GPUs, at better performance per watt. Treat that number with care. It is a vendor's claim, made before large-scale deployment. But the direction is almost certainly right, because we have seen this movie before. Google proved it across 10 years with the TPU, own the chip, and the cost of serving AI bends downward. Now the twist. If Jalapeño were a divorce from NVIDIA, you would expect OpenAI to be winding down its GPU orders. The opposite happened. In September 2025, NVIDIA and OpenAI announced a letter of intent, 10 gigawatts of NVIDIA systems, with NVIDIA intending to invest up to $100 billion as the gigawatts came online. By March, the number that actually closed was a $30 billion equity stake. Between those 2 dates, OpenAI's chip roster kept growing. An AMD agreement, a Cerebras deal, and the Broadcom program that produced Jalapeño, a custom accelerator commitment that analysts also size at 10 gigawatts. Read those events together, and the strategy is obvious. OpenAI is doing to NVIDIA what every large buyer eventually does to a dominant supplier: build a credible alternative, then watch your negotiating position transform. You don't need Jalapeño to beat the GPU. You need it to exist at scale, visibly working, so that nobody in the room believes you are captive. The best evidence it's working is that shrinking investment number. So who actually makes money on this chip? Follow the supply chain. Broadcom wins twice. It collects development fees and margin on every Jalapeño as co-developer. OpenAI joins Google and Meta on its custom silicon customer list. And it wins again on networking, because racks of custom accelerators still need switches, and Broadcom's Tomahawk line is the default answer. TSMC wins no matter what. Jalapeño is a 3-nanometer reticle-sized die with advanced packaging, among the most expensive objects TSMC knows how to make. Whether OpenAI buys NVIDIA GPUs or builds its own chips, the wafers come from the same fabs in Taiwan. And the memory makers win. 6 HBM stacks per package, multiplied by an inference fleet OpenAI wants measured in gigawatts, lands on the same 3 companies, SK Hynix, Samsung, Micron, that are already sold out of every stack they can produce. It is the pattern this channel keeps finding. In a custom silicon war, the combatants take the risk. The suppliers take the profit. Now the honest part. What could go wrong? First, the treadmill. A custom chip is not a victory. It is a subscription. NVIDIA ships a new architecture every year. To keep Jalapeño's cost advantage, OpenAI and Broadcom must re-win that race every generation. And even experienced hyperscalers stumble. Microsoft's own accelerator program has slipped repeatedly. Second, software. A chip is only as good as the compiler that feeds it. GPUs arrive with 2 decades of tooling. Jalapeño's stack is being written now for one customer's models. If OpenAI's architecture shifts, new attention variants, new sparsity tricks, the silicon cannot follow until the next tape-out. Third, utilization. A chip that is 50% cheaper but sits idle half the time saves nothing. Custom fleets live or die on keeping their queues full. Fourth, the money itself. OpenAI has now signed compute commitments across NVIDIA, AMD, Broadcom, and Cerebras that analysts total near $1 trillion, against revenue that remains a small fraction of that. Jalapeño lowers the cost per token. It does not answer whether the whole build-out is affordable, and through all of it, training stays on NVIDIA. So here is the even-handed verdict. Jalapeño is real silicon, shipped absurdly fast, aimed at the one-line item that decides whether AI services can ever be profitable, the cost of serving a token. As a negotiating instrument, it has already worked. You can read the result in NVIDIA's investment shrinking from a $100 billion intention to a $30 billion stake. As a product, it is unproven until fleets run hot through 2027, and the treadmill never stops. But step back from OpenAI's gamble, and the picture is calmer. Whichever way this goes, the same names get paid. Broadcom collects on design and networking, TSMC prints the dies, and the memory 3 sell every stack they can make. The loudest war in tech is, once again, quietest at the bank. If you want the other side of this story, we've covered it. How Broadcom quietly became the arms dealer of the AI war, and how a Taiwanese design house builds Amazon's chips on exactly the same model. Subscribe for the actual semiconductor industry view, grounded, even-handed, no hype. Thanks for watching.